Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the DFS Report. It is Monday, December the 9th. Happy Monday, I guess. It's never usually the best day of the week, but we have I want to call it decent little 3-game slate, but it's still pretty ugly. But yeah, the NHL got back to its usual bullshit this week with just like ridiculously heavy slates one day, followed by nothing. So 3 games today, 11 games tomorrow, 2 games on Wednesday, 14 games on Thursday, and 1 game on Friday. I mean, I have no idea. It's working about as well as Zach's internet and Zach's camera. It's Zach, you had a nice weekend, but I think your internet and camera might also be a little hungover.
Yeah, I think so too. Got after it on Saturday, so I'm on day 2 of a 3-day hangover right now. Evidently, my internet is doing the same. I'm actually streaming from my phone's internet right now, so who knows? Maybe I'll be around, maybe I won't, but we'll do the best we can here to bring you everything about this 3-game slate of games, because I think that's the best way to kind of describe it. Is just there's 3 NHL games on the schedule tonight.
That is true. There are 3 games. And thank you guys for your understanding last week. I had 2 travel days in a row, Thursday, Friday. Just no chance I was going to be able to come live. So we're back 5 days this week, Monday through Friday. Maybe Friday. We'll see if we want to do a 1-game slate on a Friday. Just the ridiculous scheduling. But anyways, I've got an appointment this afternoon, so we got to get through this one rather quickly. So let's get through it now. Igor Shesterkin confirmed for the New York Rangers. We're expecting to see Arvid Soderblom for the Chicago Blackhawks. Peter Mrazek is on IR. There was a lot of uncertainty surrounding the Buffalo Sabres lineup, especially their goalie at the morning skate. Some reporters suggesting it's going to be James Reimer against his former team. So we're projecting him, but again, a lot of uncertainty. We'll get to the Sabres lineup as well. There could be some big changes there. Ville Husso gets to start for the Detroit Red Wings. They just do not want Red Wings fans to have any fun whatsoever. Sam Montembeault confirmed for the Montreal Canadiens. Unclear who gets the nod for the Anaheim Ducks. John Gibson's been getting a lot of run recently. Wouldn't be shocked if this is a Lucas Dostal night. Let's get into the first game, the New York Rangers, Chicago Blackhawks. The Rangers, by far and away, the heaviest favorite on tonight's slate, minus 249 home favorites, 3.7 implied total against the Blackhawks. Just want to let you know before we get right into the meat and potatoes, Roto Grinders did not have their ownership numbers posted by the time we came live. I believe they are posted now, but we don't have ownership on today's show. But if you want to join, or if you haven't already joined the DFO DFS Discord, you can do that by clicking the link in the description of the video on YouTube, and we'll share some of the Roto Grinder stack ownership projections in there this afternoon, much like we do on the show typically. So let's get into the matchups for this one. It's the lowest event game of the slate. You're going to see a lot of this Panarin line against the Chicago second line. You're going to see a lot of Zibanejad up against the Bedard line. Then kind of a mix of the bottom 6. The Rangers third and fourth line will mix in against the Bedard line as well. But Zach, you texted me before the show started and said, wow, Chicago 2's defensive numbers are insane. And they are. They're really, really good. I don't know how much I buy into this. It's a bit of a smaller sample. I believe it's like 90 minutes. So I don't know, like Bertuzzi, Hall, and Ryan Donato doesn't scream like super talented defensive line. So I'm going to probably take that one with a grain of salt a little bit here, especially considering they're going head-to-head with this New York Rangers top line, which we know is extremely good. Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere. So, I'm not that concerned about the matchup for New York. One, they have one of the best offensive numbers on the entire slate. When you took a look, even with the bad matchup, they still graded it as the number 1 line to target tonight. So if those matchups scores are wrong at all, then New York one's an even better spot than we already think that they're in. Grading it as the number 1 line to target. So they look good. We've seen the second line, the Zibanejad line, look a little bit better recently. Riley Smith scored in back-to-back games. We've seen some really solid shot volume, which we were kind of missing for a little bit there from Zibanejad and Kreider. They've bounced back. New York 3 is always a team that a line that we like. They've obviously cooled off a little bit recently, but they've been solid all season. So this looks like a good spot here for the Rangers. Now, it is worth mentioning that they played last night or yesterday as well and lost 7-5. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that these lines are different tonight either. So just something to remember heading into this evening, that if you are building around the Rangers, be prepared for lineup changes or line shuffling at the very least. We will see how it all goes. They've basically tried everything at this point. Nothing's really working. So we'll see what they end up going with. Zach, how are you targeting the New York Rangers tonight?
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in this Rangers side of things. The matchup score for New York 1 really doesn't change the way that I feel about them. We fire these guys up all the time, and it feels like they're in probably the best spot of the 3 lines, even though their matchup score is so poor. They're obviously going to see a little bit of ice time against that Chicago 3 line as well, the Jason Dickinson line. But man, they're giving up 4.1 goals against per hour of ice time, which is a pretty significant number, despite the fact that they do an okay job of suppressing chances. I just don't see any reason to not play them. They're going to see the most ice time for the Rangers here tonight on this slate. You know me, I'm not a huge New York 2 guy, but I'm probably going to mix them in just a little bit here tonight. And then New York 3, they've got a great chance to be a real get different spot on this slate here tonight. I really like them in this matchup here going up against the Rangers. And they're coming in as the 7th best line to target, looking like the top value play in terms of line stacks on this slate.
Yeah, we've seen this Rangers top line, right? They've had their issues at times this year. Sometimes more bad than good, but for the most part, their underlying numbers are still outstanding, and we've seen them really play well recently. Vincent Trocheck's been a bit of a disappointment this year, but now he's got goals in 4 of his last 5 games. He's got 3 assists during that span as well, so he's coming alive. Artemi Panarin's got 8 points, 3 goals, 5 assists in his last 4, so that's a line that's really starting to click, and this is just a team that needs a shot in the arm here and needs these guys to be playing at their absolute best to have a chance right now because they're just so poor defensively. I have a little bit more interest in New York 2 than you do probably tonight. I think I'm starting to be to get interested, right? Like we've talked about them being maybe a lesser like a smaller, lower ceiling line than New York 1, but given these price tags right now with Kreider at 5,300, Spanish at 6,200, and even Smith at 37, they feel like a really nice price point. And I imagine, I wish we had the ownership, but I would imagine they would still probably come in a little bit lower than New York 1 tonight. So I do have interest there tonight specifically. Soderblom getting the start. We know he's been a little bit better this year, but I think this Rangers team, they're bad defensively, but they're still a team that can score a lot of goals. But speaking of being bad defensively, obviously that opens things up a little bit here for the Chicago side of things. I have a hard time really figuring out where to go with this Chicago side of things. The second line has what grades out as the best matchup of the bunch. The offensive metrics are probably the best of the bunch as well, but still pretty poor. So I don't know how much Chicago I'm going to get to tonight, although I feel like you are probably going to want some, right? Like the way the Rangers play defensively, it seems like you should probably have some interest in the Blackhawks. So do you have more interest in me, or are you saying, you know what, maybe tonight's the night that the Rangers right the ship a little bit and you got more interest in Igor Shesterkin?
Yeah, I've got some interest here in this Chicago side of things for sure. I mean, for me, I think, one-off in Connor Bedard at $7,400 isn't a terrible option. I actually do have the ownership numbers, at least for the players right now in front of me, Brock. New York 1 and 2 coming in around very similar ownership, it looks like. Bedard seeing about 11% himself. The Chicago 2 line's getting about, 7 or 8% ownership as well here. And I've definitely got some interest. Taylor Hall, Ryan Donato, I think these are the 2 guys to kind of target on this line. Tyler Bertuzzi, he is getting a lot of high-quality scoring chances, struggling to kind of convert on them here. But Hall and Donato, I mean, these are the guys who are at least providing some fairly solid shot volume, and I think that's something that you can kind of build around here. I think that, Shesterkin's probably going to be my favorite goaltending play on this slate here. He's seeing about 21% ownership here tonight, but the ownership is really quite spread out. I was thinking it was going to be a little heavier on Shesterkin than it actually is being projected right now. So I'll probably have, maybe 10% Chicago 2 in my 20 max here tonight, a little bit of Bedard 1 off, but I don't think I'm going to be going too crazy here.
Yeah, it's so hard with Bedard right now. He keeps getting stuck with line mates that he hasn't had success with this year, and nothing's changing. I don't know what they got to do to get Taylor Hall up there and just try something a little bit different. It just nothing seems to be going great. The sophomore slump seems to be hitting hard. He still makes plays and dazzles you in games, but then at the end of the night, it's just you're kind of always left wanting more. And with Shesterkin between the pipes, obviously Shesterkin hasn't quite been himself recently. Obviously coming off a pretty good performance against the Penguins the other night, and that snapped what was a 5-game losing skid for him. But all things considered, since the beginning of November, 900 save percentage over his last 12 starts. So even when he's had some decent performances, he still hasn't been sharp. But like, yeah, like I don't mind the Blackhawks. I just don't know how much I'm going to get there. Probably a small amount. The second line grades out as the 10th best. The top line grades out as 16th. Like it's really hard to have interest. And if Shesterkin's going to be super low owned, I might just bite the bullet and just go ham on Shesterkin and hope that tonight is finally a night where the Rangers are able to figure it out. I mean, the Blackhawks aren't a team that have been lighting anybody up. So you would think that they should have success in this one. In terms of the power play, the second best power play advantage of the night for New York for the New York power play unit, the fifth best advantage for the Blackhawks. They have the 12th best power play going up against the 7th ranked PK. So while the Rangers have struggled at 5v5 defensively, they've been pretty decent on the PK. With the second overall power play advantage on the night, that obviously you can power play stack for sure on a 3-game slate. That's definitely something that's viable. I think especially tonight with New York 1 and New York 2 looking pretty solid at 5v5 and also having a strong power play score. I think that makes a lot of sense and a way to get a little bit different tonight. As we see here, you've got the top line grade note number 1, the second line grade note number 5. So both look like they're in pretty good spots. Whether you want to stack them via the power play or 5v5, they should both be really, really strong plays tonight. So you said, New York 1's a little bit higher on than New York 2?
They're actually projecting for pretty much the same ownership right now, it looks like.
Okay, perfect. Okay, any final thoughts on this one before we move on, Zach?
No, ready to talk about Tage Thompson in Buffalo 1.
Woohoo. The Detroit Red Wings are super, super fun to watch right now. Just kidding. Every game they score about 1 or 2 goals and then lose by 1 goal. That's just kind of how it works. Every game's been pretty low scoring. Both of these teams have been surprisingly solid defensively as of late, but both offenses, man, have just been downright horrendous. You can see here by the matchup scores. Again, I've mentioned this all the time if you're new to the show. The matchup scores, I put a little bit less stock and a little bit less faith in them on the smaller slates just because there's way fewer lines to compare against. But like when you see something like this where the whole game is pretty much bad matchups, you just know that you've got two pretty solid defensive clubs going head to head. I mean, the Red Wings have been so solid defensively that even Billy Husso's looked pretty decent recently. So I think the Red Wings have found out that they need to play solid defensively because they aren't outscoring anybody. And that's probably going to be the case again tonight. So the Sabres as a whole, let's get into the lineup tonight really quickly because there's some weird shit going on here. And I don't know how much I want to stack this bottom 6 specifically of the Sabres with any confidence tonight because Jordan Greenway's a game time decision might return. And if you read between the lines of what was going on yesterday at practice, it looks as if there's potential that Greenway returns on the third line with Kulich and Cousins, and JJ Peterka, of all players, is going to be a healthy scratch, which would be insane. He's at least their third best forward. He's obviously struggled a little bit recently. I know he was a -3 the other night, if you want to give a shit about that. But, like, if they scratch him, I don't know what the hell else is, like, what's going on there. It's just a disaster. You can't, like, that's not – I never think that that's the way to kind of get players back. But maybe that's how the Sabres see it. So we'll see. If Greenway plays tonight, it looks – just be or be weary that, like, if there's a chance Peterka is scratched if you play him tonight. You mentioned Tage Thompson. The one thing that the Sabres have going for them tonight is that Tage Thompson absolutely decimates the Detroit Red Wings. That top line has a very strong offensive numbers tonight. The matchup not great, but yeah, like Tage Thompson obviously looks like a player that's worthy of firing it up and paying for his price tag tonight. And then Alex Tuch, man, he has been on an absolute heater. I don't know how much Peyton Krebs I'm going to get to at minimum price. He's there. On the top line, hasn't shown a whole lot of offensive ability at the NHL level, but like 18,200 to full stack. And if you need some salary relief, he's there. Tuch's salary has skyrocketed, but he's been great lately. How much of Buffalo 1 are you jamming in tonight?
Yeah, I really like Buffalo 1 here, specifically Tage Thompson. I'm comfortable playing him as individual one-offs at $8,400. Peyton Krebs at 2,500. I think it's a good way to get some salary relief in your lineups if you need it. But Krebs really does nothing out there on the ice. He's kind of just taking cardio and skating laps out there. So, don't really expect a whole lot there from him as he goes out and scores like 2 or 3 goals here tonight. Completely breaks the slate because I said that. Tage Thompson, I mean, this is the guy to talk about here. Looking back at his last 10 games against the Detroit Red Wings, now 10 games ago, he had that 3-goal, 6-point performance in an 8-3 win over the Sabres back in 2022. In the last 10 games, including that one, 8 goals, 17 points against the Detroit Red Wings, averaging like 12 DraftKings points per game, not including the bonuses. So really an interesting spot here for this top line for the Sabres. I don't know what it is that Tage has here against the Detroit Red Wings, but boy, he sure loves to play against them. And I'll be firing him up here tonight. The Sabres are actually projecting for quite a lot of ownership. Tage Thompson, 26%, Tuck, 21%, Peyton Krebs coming in around 10%. And Detroit 1 actually seeing pretty significant ownership as well over on that side of the game here too. So I don't really know if I have a whole lot of interest in this Detroit side of things. I think if there was a line to play, it would probably be that top line. I know you've played a little bit of Detroit too because of the Marco Casper play there, but they seem to be in a terrible spot. I don't mind a little bit of Buffalo 3 tonight. I think Yuri Kulich, even on his own at $3,300, is a pretty solid value play. 9.8 shots on goal per hour of ice time so far this season. $3,300 for a center who has a chance to provide a little bit of offense. Don't entirely hate that play here tonight. But as you mentioned too, it gets really difficult with the lines and what could happen here. So, the nice thing is that on this slate, all the games are right around the same start time, 7:30 Eastern. So, you'll have the time to adjust your lineups as you need to if you're building around this Buffalo 3 line at all.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had a lot of interest in Buffalo 3. As you mentioned, Kulich has been great. The shot volume is great. He's done everything he needs to do at the AHL level, and just need him to start scoring a little bit more at the NHL level because he's been great. The shot volume has been awesome. I think it's the second highest shot volume per 60 on the Sabres roster, behind only Tage Thompson. I kind of talked down and poorly about Dylan Cousins last week, and he's kind of shut my mouth a little bit. He's actually scored a couple goals recently. I think he's got 3 goals in his last 7 games, excuse me. So he's bouncing back. Paterka is just so talented at $5,500. Like I continue to love his game despite the kind of lack of production recently. So at 13,800, that looked like a line that I was very interested in getting to tonight. But if Paterka scratched his Greenway, I have a little bit less interest. I agree that it would probably be more Kulich at that point. But if Paterka's in, that is the third line I'm interested for sure. Alex Tuck, as I mentioned, he's got like 15 points in his last 16 games. He's been a monster. I will say the one thing that Zach resets the camera. Detroit 1, like I haven't played any Detroit recently because their lines have been such a mess. But Detroit 1 is really the only line that you could ever consider playing. Because when they're fully together, they've actually been really solid this year. They've been really solid last year. The offensive numbers maybe not quite as good this year, but like it's the only offensive line that can do anything for this Red Wings team. And when they're fully together, they're always in play for me. So I'll be getting to Detroit 1 tonight. Despite the ownership, I think especially if James Reimer gets the call, he's just not quite as good as Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Billy Husso, obviously not great. This game looks like it could be high scoring despite 2 struggling offenses. It feels like this is either going to be a 6-5 hockey game or a 2-1 hockey game, and there's nothing in between. It's either going to smash the over or it's going to be way under, in my opinion. Yeah. How do you feel?
Yeah, I agree with you, man. It's a weird one for sure. I don't know. I don't really know how I'm going to attack this one entirely yet. Like I said, I really like this Buffalo 1 side of things here. I'll probably have some Detroit 1 in the mix here as well. But we'll kind of see what happens as I kind of get down to it a little later on in the day.
Yeah, I don't mind. Like, I probably won't play too much Buffalo 2 as a full stack, but I don't mind Jason Zucker either. Still in that top power play unit, despite that unit not doing a whole lot. Shot volume has been pretty solid. He's having one of the best years of his career. I don't mind Zucker. Speaking of the power play, the Sabres ranked 31st in their last 10 games, going up against the Red Wings PK that ranks 21st. The Red Wings once dominant power play. The only thing that they had going for them is now bad. And this is why they can't score anymore. 20th over the last 10 games, going up against the 5th ranked penalty kill. Really, really tough spot here for the Red Wings, who grade out with the worst power play overall. So, like I said, Detroit 1 looks like that's in an okay spot at 5v5, given the offensive numbers, but I'm probably not going to be jamming them in too much. And like, if they're like 20% owned, I'll probably be just at the field, maybe just under the field at that mark. Zach, I really like the new look, just the solid white circle with the little face. Any final thoughts on this one?
No final thoughts. This is how you guys are going to see me for the rest of the show here. I don't know what's going on with the internet at Chateau Laing here today, but something's funky. So we're we're just going to go audio only for me here, so you guys don't have to look at me glitching around all the time.
No worries at all. Okay, we've got the final game of the night. You've got the Montreal Canadiens and the Anaheim Ducks. I keep going to like look at you and talk to you, and you're not there, but it's okay. I'll get used to it. The Canadiens are minus 143 home favorites against the Ducks at plus 129. This is a really interesting game because I think that both of these offenses have started to play a little bit better. I looked at it this morning, actually. The Ducks are like 0.8 more goals in their last 12 games than they had in their first 13 games of the season. So almost a full goal more per game recently. That offense has been clicking pretty good. It also grades as the highest event game of the night. Matchups are outstanding for the Montreal side of things as the Ducks continue to struggle defensively. Pretty good matchups across the board for the Ducks side of things as well. The thing with the Ducks is that it's basically the top line or bust. And I think, was it the last time we went live, Zach, when they were ranked number one line on the slate? Or was that a couple shows ago?
Yeah, I was just trying to think about that too. I think it was against Vegas last week where they were looking so great and I just smashed them and I swore to myself that I was never going to play again because they did nothing. And here they are. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
They look great. I mean, like they're the reason that this Anaheim Ducks offense has started to click recently. The offense numbers are great. Across the board. I mean, Ryan Strome is still kind of the guy that like I could care less about. Like if you want to include him, fine. He does nothing more often than he does something. But Vetrano and Terry as mini stacks at 59 and 5,600, I think is completely fine. They've both played extremely well recently. You can get Olin Zellweger in the mix there as well. We'll talk about Jacob Trouba in a second. But this Montreal side of things is really starting to perk up as well. We talked about how this top line, putting Caulfield with Suzuki, back with Suzuki, and adding Newhook to that line has really changed the game for them. Their offensive numbers have been very, very good. 38 scoring chances, 4 per 60 is just outstanding stuff. Then you factor in the 91.3 matchup score. Really, really impressive there for Montreal 1. They look like they're in a great spot. Montreal 2, still decent numbers in terms of the expected goals and the scoring chances with Patrick Laine back. He's scored 2 goals in 3 games, both via the power play. So they have yet to pop a goal at 5v5, but Laine grades out tremendously well. If you take a look at the projections, he's one of the highest projected forwards of the night at $5,400. He looks like he's in a good spot. I don't know how much I'm going to get to like Montreal 2 full stacks with Doc. He just doesn't do a whole lot, but at $2,900 for a center, it's not the worst thing if you want to full stack them at $12,100. But like a Laine, Slafkovsky mini stack, they both correlate in that top power play unit. If you want to include Lane Hudson in the mix as well, it's a pretty reasonably priced little stack there. And again, if you want to play Doc, I think that's fine. But I have a lot of interest in Montreal tonight, specifically the first and second line. And I think this second line provides some of the best value on the entire slate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really, really interesting game from pretty much any angle you want to look at it. I'm probably going to have the most of my exposure to like a single game in this one here. Obviously, Anaheim 1 looks like they're in a great spot here again tonight. They're going to break my heart, and I just know it, and it sucks because I'm going to end up playing some of them again here tonight. Troy Terry's had success against the Habs in the past. 4 goals, 8 points in 8 games. Frank Vetrano, same thing, 8 goals, 11 points in 19 games. Ryan Strome, he's even loved playing in Montreal against him too. 6 goals, 16 points in 22 games. You go through the lineups of both of these teams, and those kind of numbers are what you're seeing a lot from these matchups. These teams, for some reason, seem to score a lot against each other when they're going up against each other. Mason McTavish, 3 goals, 6 points in 4 games. You go and you look at the Montreal side of things. Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, point per game guys. Patrick Laine, 3 goals, 9 points in 12 games against him. Brendan Gallagher on the third line. I mean, he's got 5 goals and 12 points in 13 games. You go up and down the list here, and I think there's really interesting options. I'm pretty much comfortable going to be playing a lot of every line, I think, here in the top 6 for both sides, probably some Montreal 3 as well. I've actually got a lot of interest in this second line of the Habs. Patrick Laine, as you mentioned, I mean, he's been excellent, and he's not even seen a massive spike in salary or anything. He was around the $4,500 mark last week, up to $5,400 right now. I think that's going to continue to climb if he continues to have this early success right now. I think mixing him in with Doc and Slafkovsky, as you mentioned, I think there's some solid salary relief there in those guys. Doc and Slafkovsky, their volume is really, really low, but it does feel like a spot where they could smash because they got 100 matchup score here tonight. Only line with 100 on the slate. So I think they're in a really interesting spot here. The third line, I've got interest in them too. Brendan Gallagher is a guy that I kind of seem to play on the reg because he just finds a way to be around the action. He's got good shot volume, scoring 1.3 goals per hour of ice time. Taking a look at his Anaheim side as well, obviously the top line looks like they're in a great spot. The second line of the Ducks, I've got quite a bit of interest in. Mason McTavish, I think he's in a really solid spot here tonight. And Cutter Gauthier was actually one of my value plays that I wrote up at dailyfaceoff.com here. 8.5 shots on goal per hour of ice time. He's still continuing to generate a high amount of quality chances, 1.2 individual expected goals per hour of ice time. I think it's a really, really nice spot here for him to find some production. Even though the matchup and the line stats aren't necessarily the greatest, it just feels like it's going to be one of those really, really high event games where you're going to want to get as much exposure as you can to some of these lines.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more hesitant on the second line of the Ducks. I think they're in an okay spot. I kind of jammed in Gauthier and Killorn over the weekend because they're just so cheap and they weren't in the worst matchup ever. And they did nothing. Gauthier has not registered a shot on goal in 3 consecutive games, which is just baffling considering the early season success. And the early season shot volume was so good. And then now he actually gets a chance to move back up into the top 6 and play meaningful minutes. And he's just not doing anything. So I'm a little gun shy there, but like at the salary point, it's like, okay, like, how much do you really need? And he's obviously talented and we've seen him have great shot volume at other points this season. So maybe this is an opportunity in a good matchup in a high event game where he can bounce back. I think Killorn's in the same boat at $3,100, just a guy that doesn't do a ton, but at $3,100, he's still going to see, 18 minutes tonight. I think that there's plenty of value there. So I will I will kind of stuff them in as value options, but I think that the pricing is relatively soft tonight, that you don't need to get too carried away, but they look okay. I just would like to have seen more production coming into this one. Where is the ownership coming into this game? Do you have that up at all? I know it's kind of unfortunate we don't have it on the show, but
Yeah, I do. It's a lot of Montreal won. They seem to be drawing the most ownership here in this game. Suzuki, 21%, Newhook, 11%, Caulfield, 20%, Patrick Laine, 24%, 23% ownership, Doc and Slavkovsky around that 10, 11% mark too. The Ducks aren't seeing as much ownership as I was expecting. Anaheim 1, Frank Vetrano 21, Troy Terry 16, Ryan Strome 14. The second line seeing around 10% ownership as well. The third lines of both teams seeing next to no ownership. And that's the reason why I've got a lot of interest in this Montreal 3 line. Christian Dvorak projecting for 3% ownership, Gallagher 8%, Josh Anderson 2.5%. I think that's a really, really interesting pivot option to get really cheap. And again, I don't think you need to go crazy with getting cheap on this slate because the pricing is soft. And there's some defenseman spots that we'll talk about here in a moment as well that are really, really interesting for salary relief. Cough, Jacob Trouba, minimum price, Cough. Kind of an interesting one, though, to say the least here.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I've got to get going here shortly. So let's get to the defenseman right now. Okay, let's get to the blue liners. So yeah, Jacob Trouba is $2,500. You tweeted about it yesterday. We talked about it in our Discord yesterday. Pretty hilarious. He was like, $5K in New York, goes to the Ducks, and he's projected or he's sitting at $2,500. I'm imagining, they haven't said for sure, but I imagine he's going to be in the lineup tonight. Projects as obviously one of the best value plays on the slate. I think there's a couple other guys that stand out. Obviously, Lane Hudson, 4,300 in that top power play unit. I think he's got assists in 5 or 6 straight games. Owen Power with Rasmus Dahlin out is at $4,400 is on that top power play unit, despite it not really performing recently. Jackson Lacombe is a guy you really like, $3,300. He's been solid. Who else looks okay? I mean, I still like Alex Vlasic if you want to play the Blackhawks. I just don't know how much Chicago I'm going to get to. Alec Martinez, if he plays, he is a game time decision. He's questionable. They called up Kevin Korchinski to replace him if he isn't able to go, but he was hurt in their last game. Unclear if he's going to play tonight. Any other defensemen that really stick out to you? Like Simon Edvinsson, I think is still fine. I obviously have interest in Adam Fox if I can get there. What about you?
Yeah, a couple of other interesting names. Jackson Lacombe, as you mentioned, this is a guy that I love playing. Just tons of shot volume, tons of block volume as well. He always seems to find a way to get into the action. 0.7 goals per hour of ice time this season, playing around 18 and a half minutes. Really, really solid clip there. Braden Schneider, I think, is a really interesting play here tonight, projecting for about 4% ownership. He's on the second pairing for the New York Rangers. Sees most of, if not all of his ice time within that top 6. I mean, this is a guy who does a lot of things on the ice in terms of shots and blocks. 5.1 shots on goal per hour, 6.6 blocks. In what feels like a really good spot for the New York Rangers. You want to find a way to get some of those guys, and I think getting him into your lineups is a really solid way to drop a little bit of ownership down, get a lower owned guy. I think Ben Sherrod is a good play at 3K today on this slate, projecting for about 7% ownership. Victor Mancini, min price, $2,500. Don't mind him whatsoever as well, even though he doesn't see a ton of ice time out there.
This comment's great. Martinez blocked a shot with his head last game. That is true, but they did call him day to day. And like, if anybody was going to block a shot and then play the next game, it's Alec Martinez. I don't anticipate he's going to be in the lineup tonight, though. I don't think they would have recalled a defenseman if he was close. But yeah, he took one off like the head and neck area. Never good. Okay, goalies really quickly. It's always a little bit more difficult on these smaller slates. Kind of just don't play the guy that you're stacking. But Shesterkin at $8,400, I mentioned, is the guy that I really, really like tonight. I don't mind Montembeault. He's played pretty well recently. Obviously, the Ducks offense has been better, but like they're still the Ducks. I do think Montembeault at 7,900 is still in a pretty good spot. After him, I do think Dostal's fine. Obviously, if the Canadians are going to see that much ownership tonight, Dostal or Gibson both have played well, are solid leverage plays. I don't know how much Husso, Reimer, Soderblom I'm going to get to tonight. I do think Husso and Reimer, you could make the case. Like, Husso's obviously been solid at $7,300. I think you could make the case that this game could be pretty low scoring. Like, the implied totals are fairly high, so like I don't love it. But I do think that there is an argument to be made that both these offenses have struggled, and both Husso and Reimer are fine plays. So, like I said, on these smaller slates, I don't really try to lock in too much, and I just kind of let my builds dictate which goalies I play and try to pick a couple favorites. And for me tonight, that's mostly Shesterkin and Montembeault, and I'll pay down for maybe Husso and Dostal. How about you?
Yeah, I do tend to agree with you there. I mean, it's kind of interesting when you look at the ownership here in this spot as well. Igor Shesterkin, projecting for the most ownership, 21.5%. Ville Husso, 20%. Sam Montembeault, 18%. Then Soderblom, Dostal, and Reimer in that order, 14, 13, 12. So, like I said earlier, I mean, the ownership's a little bit more spread around in the crease than I kind of was thinking. Like, I was thinking Shesterkin was going to be coming in pretty hot around that 30, 35% ownership mark. I think he's a great play tonight at $8,400. Soderblom is probably the guy that I'm going to have absolutely zero of here. No real interest in getting to him in this spot. Husso and Reimer, I think you can make an argument for both of these guys. I'm just not entirely sold because, again, like we talked about earlier, like it feels like it's going to be either a 2-1 game or a 6-5 game, right? And Dostal and Montembeault, I think that's where I'll also have a fair amount of ownership. Also because I think that's going to be a higher volume game too, right? So, you might see 3 or 4 goals against here, but this still has the opportunity for these guys, to get around that 12, 15 point mark on this slate. And I think that might be all you really need here tonight. So yeah, again, like you said too, I kind of tend to let my builds dictate my ownership of the goaltending and kind of go from there with things. But Shesterkin feels like a great play. I don't mind Reimer at all either. And Dostal, I think, is in a good spot too.
Okay, let's get to today's hat trick pick challenge before I head out. If you want to participate in today's hat trick pick challenge, comment your hat trick pick in the comment section of the video on YouTube, not the live chat. If your player scores a hat trick, we will get you a $25 gift card to Nation Gear. You can pick up some DFO swag. I won the most recent DFO head-to-head. I actually swept the week last week, which was the only thing I won in DFS. It was an absolutely nightmarish week for me. Maybe because we weren't doing the show. It's probably why. My hat trick pick for tonight is going to be... Let's go with Troy Terry. How about you?
Nice. Don't mind that at all. I'm going with Artemi Panarin, the bread man. 8 goals, 11 games played against the Chicago Blackhawks. I think he's in a great spot here tonight.
All right, let's get to today's DFO head-to-head really, really quickly, and we will send the people on their way. So as I mentioned, I was losing heading into last week, and then now I have a 19-18 lead in the season standings. I went with a bit of a funky build today. I've got the Zibanejad, Chris Kreider mini stack. I went with a Tage Thompson one-off, and then I went with Patrick Laine, Uri Slafkovsky, Lane Hudson as a little bit of a Montreal 2, Montreal power play mini stack, and then I went with the Trouba train at 2,500. Hard to ignore that price tag. And then I had just enough money to fit in Troy Terry and Igor Shesterkin. So a bit of a cashier build for me tonight. Probably not a lineup I'm going to play a ton tonight. When I dig in a little bit more later, though, who knows? Maybe it's going to be optimal.
Yeah, who knows? It'll be interesting to see what happens. Hopefully, I can get a little bit of a bounce back here in the head-to-head matchups. Tough week for me last week in these bad boys. Don't know how I feel about this one, but I think it's interesting enough. Mason McTavish, Cutter Gauthier mini stack with some Jacob Trouba there, $2,500. It's just ridiculous, man. I don't understand what they're doing with the pricing there. Makes no sense to me at all. Three one-off plays really here. Tage Thompson, Artemi Panarin, and Cole Caulfield. I ended up with Alex Newhook for a little bit of correlation with Caulfield on the top line of Montreal. It was a bit of a coin flip for me between Newhook and Peyton Krebs. I ended up going Newhook just because he does a little bit more on the ice than Peyton Krebs does. Obviously, both of these guys are the same price. Bowen Byram, little correlation there with Tage Thompson, and Shesterkin in the crease, fresh off of his new contract.
There you have it, fresh off a new baby as well. Congratulations to the Shesterkins who had a baby girl yesterday. Okay, that's going to do it for this edition of the DFS Report. We'll be back tomorrow at our regularly slotted time, 4 p.m. Eastern. If you haven't already joined the DFO Discord, there is a link in the description of the video on YouTube. And as I mentioned, I'll drop all the RotoGrinders ownership projection line stack graphic that I always have together for the show. I'll drop it in there later after my appointment. Until then, best of luck tonight. Good luck tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Zach, our little black box guy, any final words?
No, that's it for me. Hopefully I can figure out this internet thing.
All right. See you guys back here tomorrow. Cheers.
Cheers.